My name is Hirosha. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Marketrix, and then today we have a very special episode, actually with a very special guest as well. So Dennis, thanks a lot for making it today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So Dennis Cardoso, so you are coming from a very strong sales and a marketing background where you've been one of the previous managing directors at Google as well, right?
Yes.
And then, of course, moving from there, you have this year you joined in as an advisor for Marketrix as well, and then you've been giving an amazing direction, Dennis, right? So to our audience as well, why don't you maybe tell a little bit about yourself, what your journey has been so far?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you again for having me. I guess I start off with I'm Silicon Valley born and raised, and so I've always been in the Valley and mostly with startups, well, always with startups when I started. And my background is at a series of startups doing marketing, sales strategy, and analytics, so it's a pretty diverse range of functions that I've performed. And that was through different technologies, internet routing protocols,
right,
and browsers, and that got me to search engines and optimization and marketing search to ad platforms, digital ad platforms, and that got me to Google. And that's the most notable brand of company I worked for, and I spent 19 years there doing a lot of the same things,
right,
doing sales, marketing, sales strategy, and analytics, and I always did it as part of the ad sales team. So I worked with advertisers all over the world who are using digital to better engage customers, to understand how to better engage customers. And so that diverse background of sales and strategy and analytics comes in handy because I understand deeply what the sales process is, what it takes to go to market and to engage prospects and customers, but also the data that's required for it. And there's been massive evolutions, especially with digital and the way consumers engage digitally. And I think that's why we're here today, is to talk about how that evolution continues and how AI is going to evolve it even further in such an exciting way.
Yeah, absolutely, Dennis. So I mean, one of the questions that I've asked when we first spoke, right?
Yeah.
So you've driven major teams at Google in terms of driving their sales, right?
Yes.
And now most of our audience is actually startups and then founders, right? So first question that I asked from you is how can we bring these sales practices from Google to startups, right?
Yeah.
And then you gave me a very fun answer, telling that when Google takes a call, telling that this is so and so from Google calling, people have to pick it up, right? But when it comes to startup, it's a different story. Maybe if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. I mean, Google was a startup when I joined. It wasn't the most known company. It grew into that. But yes, it's that kind of stature now that most marketers are going to use Google for their advertising. It's just one of the necessary platforms. I would say, though, in my experience, I always worked with a range of companies, ranges of industries and practice, B2B, B2C, and I worked with large enterprises, the Fortune 100s, down to small venture-backed firms and private companies. And one thing that is constant about them is that they have access to a treasure trove of data that doesn't require a huge budget to utilize to improve the sales and marketing process. And I can get into that a bit more. I think the important thing about any of these companies is understanding how the buyer journey has evolved and continues to evolve. And I'll focus on B2B because Marketrix is really focused on it, but it also applies to B2C. But the more complex and considered a purchase, higher cost, or very involved engagement, integrating software and those sort of things, that kind of process has become more and more in the control of the buyer. And what they do now, and there's plenty of studies that get into this. I know Gartner produced a study, BCG and others. The majority of research that happens in a purchase now happens online by the purchaser buyer, and they don't engage right away. In fact, they spend most of their time, 70% or greater, depending on the study, but always in that 70 to 80% range of doing their own research before they will ever call, email, or supply their contact information. So their consideration is pretty evolved, and they probably have whittled down their consideration to one or two companies by the time they decide to engage you. Now that's scary for a company because you don't know necessarily what stage they're in. You do a lot of work to try and get ahead of that. What I would say though is the good news in all of that is that the preferred sources of information when they're doing the research is actually that vendor supplier's websites, their blogs, their content, videos, things like that. So you are in control of the engagement. Now it's a matter of optimizing it. And so that's where I think AI is especially exciting. You think about that evolution of the buyer now having more control and doing most of the research before they engage you. So where you're bringing them in and having that flow of information is your website, maybe your apps, blogs, any content that you allow to be distributed to them, white papers, things like that. So you do a lot of work to optimize those things for flow, to have the right landing pages, to have the right sections of content, and then to provide ways to engage. And we're talking about lead forms, email, calling, numbers that you can even click, directly from your browser or from the app to engage. Now, usually in the purchase process, that content that we have up there, the pages, the content that you're optimizing, you're doing A/B testing for, that experience is very passive for the buyer. You are not actively engaged. Hopefully all the work you did to optimize it is giving that user the information they need. But with AI now, you can actually become more actively engaged through an AI agent and give the user a better experience, answer questions more specifically, faster, and it's like having someone there standing next to them, guiding them through the consideration process, so it accelerates the whole thing. With that comes a huge amount of signals that you can use to better optimize sales marketing, coach your sales teams, your call centers, your marketing programs, even the content on your website.
Yeah, so that's great, Dennis. I mean, the topic that we are diving into today is actually how can businesses leverage AI and engagement signals for better lead qualification, right?
Yeah.
So if we are to dive in and tell a little bit, Dennis, what are these engagement signals, right? And how can these, why are these engagement signals, are significant in the lead qualification process?
Yeah. So thinking again about the types of interactions that you're going to have, and let's just stay for the sake of the example on a website, all those pages, the sections of the pages, the content itself, the topics. When you start to think about the engagement signals that come from that, I think of it in three areas. I think of the what, the why, and the who that you can get answered by the engagement that's happening. Now, when we start to apply what with AI in consideration, you're thinking about the content of the page in general, but even sections of content. What are they looking at? What does that indicate about their interests? And then you can start to even dive in a bit deeper. If you have an AI agent on site, you're going to have conversation develop about this. So now not only is there a passive experience of reading, now you can become active in giving them more guidance on the content, allowing the user to ask questions and then provide answers. So the questions they're asking, the answers they're getting from the AI agent now start to inform engagement signals for the sales team downstream about already what are they most interested in. It will also get into other topics. It could be around, you think about resources downloaded and these other things. All of these little things tell you what they're interested in, and then you can start to glean why. And that comes through looking at that conversation that you're collecting from the AI agent, those words, those phrases that they're using. It can indicate pain points for the buyer, something they're trying to solve, or budget. What are their constraints? Size of company. So how big is the company? What is their need? So you don't overstep or understep when you're trying to give them a solution that works best for them. Intent comes from gleaning those little insights. And then I think another thing would be content that you're also pulling from other sources besides the website that the agent has access to. All of those things give you better intent. And then again, the who, that's an identity area that I think the agent can give you. What I see there is understanding where they are, location, geography. If you're providing resources, solutions, services that are regionally oriented, that gives you a better insight about how to approach that customer as a sales rep. I think also about industry and function. You may have solutions that are tailored towards specific industries, or it could be finance versus real estate or insurance. It can be also function, or you're talking to someone in sales and marketing and customer service. The resource that you provide might vary wildly for them. And then who are they? What title do they have? Are they a senior level decision maker, or are they just collecting information for the decision maker? And then again, get back to business size. All of those signals become who they are, what they were interested in, why they're interested. That is a treasure trove for the salesperson or the marketer to get the best foot forward when they now engage when the time comes. And hopefully you've accelerated that process so that the customer's already, in a position to then have that conversation.
Yeah, so one of the interesting points that you mentioned was, Dennis, regarding active versus passive signals, right?
Yes.
So now when we think about passive signals, so maybe page, we say it, so or engagement, click-throughs and things like that, right? Yeah. But when it comes when we think about active ones, maybe form submission, right? Yeah. These are much more stronger, right? Mm-hmm. How do you differentiate these things, right? And then how can the difference between these two be utilized better so that sales team can perform?
Yeah, so one of the beautiful things I think about the Marketrix solution is that it has a few advantages in the fact that it's guiding the conversation, informing the user to things they want to know. It also is co-browsing, and it has a spatial awareness of what's happening on the site. If you inform it how the site's structured and what's there, you can then get more active in the conversation. So if the user asks about a specific section, it highlights that area, goes deeper. If you start to notice in that spatial awareness that there's a deeper conversation, a longer conversation about specific areas of the site, then you can get much deeper on that as a salesperson, because now you've pinpointed specific areas of interest. Yeah. So you've turned something that would have been passive, browsing the site, finding a section, reading the entire page, but you don't know what specifically they cared about the most, to something active. Because the AI agent's present, it can provide more specific information even beyond what the page provides, and show the company, the organization, how much time was spent on a particular section answering specific questions that buyer had. Now you've turned it into an active conversation. Yeah. You have now scaled your sales team to better qualify that user so that when the live rep gets involved, they now have so much information that they can pinpoint specifically what to ask and then move the process along faster.
So this is actually an area where I'm quite passionate about is the power of now, right? Because there's a lot of tools that's available out there that sort of does a post-mortem, right? In terms of after the say the visitors come to the site, right? Maybe done all the browsing, you get Hotjar, probably Google Analytics, right? So all these things, they are able to sort of you can identify the behavior after the site visitor has left, right? But they've already but what really matters and what's valuable is how you can catch the person when they're actually on the site itself, because that's where their intent is there right now, right? So then how can we utilize? So I think that's a very way that you narrowed down that problem, Dennis.
Yeah, and I think that gets into implementation. Yeah, and that's an important next piece, because you have lots of signals being collected. You have the AI agent, doing its own collection of information based on the behaviors it's collecting, and the information with that. And then you have site analytics. You might have customer analytics packages, CRM, CDP. If you start to pull all of these things together, you start to develop a very holistic picture that helps sales and marketing even more, because now you've made it very rich, very actionable, and it benefits the lead scoring process for one of those complex journeys.
Yeah, absolutely, Dennis. So if we can dive into the next thing, right? So in terms of now, AI has really transformed, right? How how this traditional, because previously also, I think to some level, sales teams were able to identify signals from customers, right? Yeah. But now with AI coming in, it has really become a much different landscape, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think, Dennis, how does this AI processors coming into businesses, right? And then analyzing engagements, utilizing AI, right? How can this identification of patterns using AI become different as opposed to traditional process that used to be there in the past?
Yeah. So that evolution to me becomes just more information, better customer defined interactions. I think that to me ultimately is where this benefits with AI. that active engagement in what was traditionally a passive process, passive in the sense that you did a lot of optimization and you provided certain experiences that were basically run independent by the customer, the prospect, has now become something active and engaged. And so what you end up getting, and I go back to like integrations with systems, like if this is a new visitor, a potential new customer versus someone who is already engaged and is still in consideration, maybe has come along, versus already a customer and maybe now has grown and is looking to upgrade or get a bigger package, upgrade and upsize their contract. All of these little signals now become better because the AI agent is giving you this information. And I think one of the most exciting things that you all do is not only can you do that with the AI agent, but now you can actually have live agents integrated in the process. So if there's a moment where they would rather now get to just having more specifics discussed, the AI agent can seamlessly transfer to a live agent and just continue the flow. And so there's an easy handoff. And again, I think that's a massive evolution, right?
Yeah.
In the past, you would have said, okay, great, give us a call. And they might be going into a call center without all that information attached. Or here's our form, give us your contact information, and someone will call you back, hopefully with that information. But to just do it real time, immediate, to me just is a massive evolution in the process.
Yeah, so I mean, I've spoken to a lot of customer experience and customer success leaders, Dennis, right? And then most of the time, what they tell is still AI is not ready, right? So then, always our customers are looking at connecting with a real person as opposed to speaking to an AI, because I'm sure you must have also gone to all these chatbots, right? And then you are trying to how soon you can get through to a real person, right? So this is where I see some of the, one of the conundrums that's there as well, right? Yeah. How do you see, in your opinion, Dennis, where people are becoming, would people become more confident in speaking to AI, right? Towards the future as AI keeps getting better. What are your thoughts on that in terms of people transitioning to adopt these technologies?
Yeah, I think, you see it today already in social media and chat apps. Chat bots are present everywhere, consumer experiences, professional buyer experiences. So I think it's already there. I think it's an evolution that's already underway. People are doing it, had been doing it more often for personal needs, these basic AI assistants. But I also now see it happening more and more for commerce, for business. And I think consumers are just getting easier and more used to this. And in some cases, generationally, it's becoming preferred.
Yeah.
People like to have that engagement first. They're more in control, I guess, and it's more comfortable for them.
Than speaking to a real person.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is something that just generationally is already starting to happen, and I think it's going to accelerate because of that. So it's already happening. I think that the challenge to me is making sure that experience is as optimized as possible, and so it's not too generic. A lot of people will engage with chat bots or AI chat that are based on generic information, and there's a lot of good and bad information out there. But if you're providing an AI experience for your user on your site or on your app, if you train it properly, it'll do a better job. And so that means giving it the structure of the site, of the app, so that the agent's aware of where it is, that means, and how to guide someone with it. The content of the page and the themes, the topics, you can train all of that.
Yeah.
And then also additional information. So that experience they're having live with the AI agent, there might be other questions that aren't present immediately there, but that the AI agent knows of by feeding it additional content that you have on the back end that can supplement the conversation. All of that training is what you would do for a real person, right? Your sales reps, your marketing teams and people, all of those people are getting trained on how to talk about your products, your solutions, and how to talk to a customer. And I think you want to do the same thing for the AI agent to give the consumer, the buyer, the confidence that they're getting exactly what they need. So it starts with training, feeding it the right information, and then you start to develop some other information. I think like integrating customer data so that they have an even more personalized experience. So this is where CRMs and CDPs get involved. The more personalized you can make it, or the more contextually accurate that you can make it, the more trust you have, with the user and the company.
Yeah, absolutely, Dennis. So, now in terms of when we go towards the aspect of these practical applications, right? So then, what are your have you utilized in particular tools that you can maybe recommend to our audience, right? So then of course we spoke about Marketrix, right? So then apart from that, any other tools, right, that people can adopt, right, to identify better signals and then make this lead qualification process better?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the tools are actually already out there and very adopted. So you mentioned site analytics, and there are many site analytics platforms out there. They're wildly adopted. I think they're some of the most adopted. So you know Adobe and Google Analytics and a lot of other companies. Those systems are already ubiquitous. All you have to do is integrate that also with your AI agent experience. So the data being collected and shared gives you a more holistic picture of the behaviors that are happening. So referral traffic in, where's the referral coming from? What's the source? Where do they land? Now, what information did they see? What agent engagement happened? And how did that flow work? And that allows more optimization of that experience, the content and conversation experience. And then again, I mentioned customer data. So CRMs, CDPs, whatever you do to collect customer data, if you can do that in a way that can be integrated again with what's happening on your properties, what's happening with the AI agent, it informs the agent, but it also just informs overall who is there and why, and what you need to do to follow up with them, and then also generically to optimize the experience. So if you start seeing bounce rates increase in a particular area, or you're having some complaints. I know a lot of AI agents, including Marketrix, can do sentiment analysis, right? Frustration.
Yeah.
Like if you start to get these signals, you can optimize the experience so that people get what they want, the right content at the right moment. And I think once you start integrating those tools and platforms, that picture that it develops about what that customer is doing and who they are allows the agent to give you an even better experience.
Yeah. So next up then it's now if a business is just getting into implementing these AI signals into their sales process, right? How can when we are speaking about more of practical implementation, right? If there is a business that's just starting up this process, right? What practical steps would you recommend them to get this process started, understand signals better, right? How can they get into this journey?
Yeah, well, I think it gets down to establishing a sense of what your purpose is. What are the objectives? Again, is this for improving lead qualification and engagement? Or is this about commerce flow? Like, what is it you're trying to accomplish? And then, obviously, what platforms give me, the features that I need for that purpose? And from there, what content, what, properties and structures do I have that I can organize, just like you're doing site maps and you're doing content mapping and you're structuring everything to flow a certain way. Package that in a way that when you do invest in AI and AI agents for analytics and for customer engagement, all of that is being fed accordingly to that platform. So I think those elements are very important to get right up front, so you know what you have to offer and what that platform, the AI platform, can do with that. And then from there, what integrations that you can build on. So again, customer data, your own customer experience information. It might be trapped in some other silos.
Yeah.
How does that integrate? Can it integrate? What partners does that platform, AI platform, offer that you use or that you would like to use? Those are all part of the understanding process before you commit to a particular platform.
Right. So that's great, Dennis. So as a business is starting to adapt, say we get into this process, right? What challenges do you think they would face, right? And what are the practical ways that you can guide in terms of overcoming these obstacles that they may come up with?
Yeah, well, when you're collecting data, number one, you just want to make sure you're following policy. There's obviously a lot of privacy considerations that you want to make sure you follow. That's built into all of these platforms, but you want to be very explicit about that and make sure that's clear, in your own terms and conditions and user agreements, so that you're following policy and law. So that's one, just to make sure that's clear. But then the other one is then your own teams and organization. So it's one thing to have the technology and implement it, but is it being used, and is it being used to its potential? And I think that's where a lot of companies may lose out. So, I think about training your people on what this new technology offers, how that integrates into the systems and the tools and reports they already use, and then how to make sure that's being used as optimally as possible to improve the sales process when salespeople are engaging in the marketing process, when you're developing programs and customer engagement. So your team knows exactly what's at their fingertips and making the most of it. And one thing that I think about when I consider lead generation and considered cycles, lead forms are a popular way, especially for advertising in lead gen, to make that work. A lot of companies try to optimize that advertising to the point where they almost force you to the bottom of the funnel right away. So a lot of promotion will happen to send you right to a custom landing page that has very few options to leave except give me your contact info. Here's some basic information, but I want your contact info and I'll follow up. But again, going back to that process that I mentioned, the research that's been done, a lot of people do not want to engage you right away if they're earlier in the process. Sending them to a forced lead form could really choke off your funnel. So you might get a few leads closed that are further in their consideration, but you may have alienated a huge population of people that are not ready to have that conversation and provide that information. So again, training. Maybe we don't force a lead form all the time. Let's learn from trying different experiences that an AI agent can provide and find out if we can get more customers that way, more and better customers.
Yeah. So another thing that I want to pick your brain is, Dennis, right? So then most of these signals are quite dependent on the trail, rather, like, the visitors are leaving throughout, like, when they're browsing pages, like, and all these things like that, right? But one of the areas that I listened to recently is the death of the cookie is coming up, right? So Google created the cookie, right?
Well, didn't create, but used it, very well.
To use it very well, right? So and then, like, now because of all these, like, things that are coming up now, the death to the cookie is coming up as well, right?
And it has been restricted in multiple environments, multiple browsers. Google did just announce that they are going to not proactively eliminate cookies on Chrome, but users still can. And all the research that I've read indicates that users will progressively and continue to limit cookies in their own experience. So some of the studies I've seen said that in a few years, 90% of all web traffic will have no cookies attached.
Right.
So it's significant, right?
90%, right.
Yeah, and even more reason why your own experiences, your site, your apps, your blog, whatever it is that you provide, you're using that to its full potential because that's where you're going to have a better experience for that user.
Right.
And you don't need a cookie and you don't need an advertiser ID on a mobile device. You have your own information about that user, which improves the customer experience.
Right. So quite interesting times that we are stepping into as well, right? With Apple quite very heavily advocating towards privacy and things like that as well, right?
And it makes sense. That's what the user wants.
Correct.
And kind of like, again, the B2B customer journey, the user wants to do their own research first and they don't want you to identify them at least right away. This is all good for the user and we're just respecting that.
Yes, so that's great, Dennis. So I personally learned quite a lot, right, from this conversation, and I'm sure, our audience learned as well. So thanks a lot once again, for doing this. Dennis, any other final thoughts, maybe, that you have for someone probably, trying to get into this journey? Any other final thoughts?
Well, I think, with all things, just dive into it, research, find what you love about it and are interested in. And, to me, that's how we met.
Yeah.
I was just so involved and interested in the technology because it's evolving rapidly. And, just have conversations, research, read, talk to people who are in the space, and it just goes from there.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Really appreciate your thoughts and insights, right? So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in with Selling with a Robo. We'll see you at our next episode.